They say in Spanish, nothing ever translates the same, but they say that faces we see and hearts we don't know. And that's certainly true in today's society where, like Chris Rock once said, that when you meet people for the first time, you don't meet them, you meet their representative. It's certainly true in society where you kind of meet what people want you to meet about themselves. And you kind of know what people want you to know about themselves versus who they truly are. And it's very hard to, and sometimes difficult, to be true to thyself, as Shakespeare once said. And for this reason, I decided to open up a little bit more. Those that know me know that I try to be as open as I can when I can, and that's part of the reason behind this video. And in this video, I just want to touch a little bit about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Why? Because we all know, most of us, know someone that has been affected, is being affected, or struggling through it. So, get a little bit into my story. January 2003, I joined the military. Growing up in the ghetto, it was an easy transition to find a way out. When you're surrounded by a negative environment, it offers you the opportunity to get out. I grew up in the Bronx, New York, and it was a fairly drug-infested neighborhood, low income, single parent household. And school became a means to an end. School for me became a way to eat, a way to get food. Growing up in New York City, I was very thankful for the school lunch program because many times it was all the food that I got that day. And even in the summertime, when there was no school, there was the summer school program, which became my meal of the day. So very thankful to be part of a country that offered that. I know there are many places that don't have that, so I'm very thankful for that. So all through high school, I did really well in school, all things considered. But it was very hard to focus, as you can imagine. It's hard to focus when your stomach is empty or when you have real life worries on top of everything else. So the military became an easy transition where everything is kind of paid for and covered, and they take some of those external stressors away. That being food, shelter, and even education, because they do offer you education if you so choose to. So January 2003, I joined the military, the United States Marine Corps. It was a great decision. It was one of the best decisions I've made in my life. It took me away from a lot of my environments, and it gave me structure. It gave me some of those things that I needed. So fast forward, went many places, met a lot of really great servicemen and women while I was in, and built relationships I'll never forget, but also lost people that I'll never forget. So that brings me to the point that I'm going to make. 2005 into 2006, we were in Fallujah, Iraq. We lost quite a few people. Quite a few people were injured. I won't get into details. And quite a few people never came back the same. And even the ones that thought that they were not harmed by it, that they were not fazed by it, actually ended up being affected by it. And I'm speaking specifically for myself. Came back, suffered some minor bursts of anger, of hypervigilance, short-temperedness, forgetfulness, and a whole array of symptoms that came from PTSD. I've always been fairly open about the way I was feeling. I always had an outlet, and I talked about it, and I thought that I was fine because I was talking about it. And at the same time, I was also in the police force because I was in the reserves as a military member. So going back into the police force, I thought I was fine because, again, I was in an environment that doesn't seem like abnormal. The hypervigilance doesn't seem as abnormal. Some of those symptoms associated with PTSD were not seen as abnormal. It just kind of fit in. So I didn't think I had a problem. Fast forward 2009. I was supposed to go for my next deployment, and I ended up getting injured about a week, 2 weeks before the actual ship date. And I was left behind in California. Some might have seen it as a blessing. It was a curse for me because once I was no longer in control of the situation, of my fellow servicemen, that's when the nightmares, the trauma, and everything associated with it started coming back from that deployment back in 2005. Dealt with it for a little while. So many experts talked about it. And again, I thought I was fine. I was very communicative. I had healthy outlets, and I had no dependency on any external drug or booze or anything for that matter. So I thought I was fine. Over time, you start realizing the more you learn about yourself, and I have my wife to thank for that, and my eldest daughters, because you start seeing the shortness. You start seeing the forgetfulness. You start seeing some of the vigilance. At this point, I had relocated to Canada, where I live today, and I was taken out of my environment. And when I was taken out of my environment in New York City, you start to see that the way you were feeling is actually not okay. The things that you were doing are actually not okay. And it became a time for me to confront a lot of the things that I tried to suppress before, like many of us have. And it's taken some time. Not 100% of the way there, but I'm pretty darn close. But it's been a journey. And the reason behind this video is so that hopefully this motivates some of you out there to actually seek help, talk about it, or just be open to receiving help for that matter. We're very good at protecting our own. We're very good at being our brother's keepers. We're very good at protecting our six, or protecting our comrade six. But once we come into civilian world, we fall into our own routines and our own to-dos and worries, and we forget that a little bit. We forget the never leave anyone behind. All those things that make us who we are and make us very efficient in combat, we somehow tend to forget them somewhat when we come into the civilian sector. And some of the normal worries become very overwhelming. And the best way that I can equate that is there was a scene in Hurt Locker, I believe, when he comes back from combat and he's standing, his wife sends him to buy groceries, and he's standing in the cereal aisle, and he's just overwhelmed with the selection of cereal. How many cereal brands and types are there? And he goes into a full, very subtle but full panic attack, an anxiety almost. And that was so very true. I felt like I was reliving parts of my life when I saw that. And it was so subtle that unless you've been through it, you can't fully appreciate that scene of how overwhelming something so simple like that really was. Because there were certain times that I certainly felt combat would have been a lot easier than doing something as simple as that in the real world. Combat would have been a lot easier. And I can almost guarantee you that I'm not alone in thinking like this. To the civilian sector, this may seem unfathomable, but it's a reality. We are trained very well in what we do. And once you're trained, once you're in it, and once you go through the traumas, it becomes what you know and what you cling on to. Years later, following our first time in Iraq, we had a reunion. It was the 10th year anniversary of our first time there, in remembrance of those that we lost, and I think a bit of healing for those of us that came back. And it was great. It was a great time seeing everyone, at least those that were back. Not everyone went, but a large portion of us went. And it was great seeing everyone. I'll say that again, but it was also sad. It was sad for those that were not there with us. It was sad because some had clear signs that there was trauma there. Never spoken about it, but you can tell. Some that seemed fine in the beginning when we first got back were not so great during that reunion. There was a lot of avoidance of certain topics. There were a lot of subtle things that, through therapy in the years, I was able to notice in some of my buddies that were there that night, my brothers. The theme of that night was suicide prevention. There was it was heavy in the air about looking out for our own, being there for each other, because it is a real thing. As a police officer, I responded to many instances where you get to the home and it's a dead veteran that lost the battle to suicide, committed suicide. We've lost too many people, and again, I can't stress enough that this is the reason for this video. In the military, we try not to do anything halfway. We give it our all, or we don't do it at all. And when it comes to being honest with yourself and facing some of the demons in our closets, we tend to go half of the way there. And we have to do better. We must do better. You owe it to yourself, and you owe it to those around you, family, friends, neighbors, daughters, sons, wife, mother, father, everyone. It's taken a lot of patience from my wife and my kids for me to overcome my demons, and it's a work in progress. But it's a battle that we have to win. As a collective, we have to win. And I'm speaking specifically to combat trauma, but PTSD affects people even in the civilian world. Victims of attacks, victims of rape, any kind of traumatic experience can cause PTSD. And it's my exhortation that we all find someone, talk to someone, seek help. And that's the hardest part. the hardest part is being helped, because no one wants to feel weak. No one wants to admit that there is a problem. And it's something that will consume you unless you start opening the doors for that help. Here in Canada, I try to get involved with a great organization. It's called Rentals for Heroes, where they bridge the gap where the government falls short with some of the needs of our veterans here in Canada. And it's a great organization. There's a way for me to stay involved with my military community, being that I am so far removed from my brothers back home. But this is my exhortation, that if you are a military person, that you find your buddy that can relate, understand, and will make the transition of talking about it a little bit easier. You find somebody that you're comfortable with, whether it be clergy, whether it be a friend, whether it be spouse, whomever it is, professional, just find somebody. And if you are a family member, a friend, neighbor, acquaintance of someone that has served, or you somehow know that they've been through a traumatic experience, that you make an effort to reach out. It is not the easiest thing to do, but just make an effort. We weren't like this before we joined the military per se, and it's the price that we paid to serve our country. And as a civilian, let's do what we can to help those that have served us. Whether you agree behind the reasons why we were there or not, it's out of our control, but let's do the best that we can to help those when they need us most. Thank you for your time.